Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a massive, highly interconnected, and honestly fascinating chain reaction. We'll be diving deep into the geopolitical and economic analysis of financial crash expert Professor Steve Keen. As you'll see, his models suggest that seemingly isolated regional conflicts can actually trigger global systemic failures, literally disrupting everything from the food on our plates to the tech we use every single day. So, how exactly does a tiny 21-kilometer stretch of water tie into the future of artificial intelligence and our global food supply? It sounds a bit like the setup for a geopolitical thriller, right? But according to the analysis, this is a very real scenario. We're going to explore how localized tensions in the Middle East can cascade into severe global food shortages and completely halt tech manufacturing worldwide. Let's get right into it with Section 1, the fragile global choke point. To really understand this hidden macroeconomics, we have to zoom in on the Strait of Hormuz. It's right at the center of the current Middle East conflict, and it brilliantly illustrates our systemic fragility. It's a remarkably narrow choke point in the Persian Gulf, literally just 21 kilometers wide. Think about that for a second. That's barely a half marathon. Yet this tiny, hyper-fragile gap physically dictates the flow of the globe's most critical resources. Now, you're probably thinking about oil, right? But we aren't just talking about oil. According to Professor Keen, a staggering 30% of the entire world's helium comes from a gas field spanning Saudi Arabia and Iran. And every single bit of that helium has to pass right through this exact, vulnerable 21-kilometer gap to reach the rest of the world. And get this, the exact same geographic dependency applies to our global food chain. Roughly 20 to 30% of the world's fertilizer originates from this specific region. It's created as a byproduct alongside these gases, relying on sulfur and a process called Haber-Bosch. And yep, all of that has to flow through the Strait of Hormuz too. What's absolutely wild here is the contrast in perception. When tensions flare up in the Middle East, the everyday worry is usually just paying a few extra bucks at the gas pump. But the experts, they're predicting a vastly different reality. One involving an impending global famine and a total halt to semiconductor manufacturing. Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, semiconductors, fertilizer, and famine.
So, that helium we mentioned earlier, it's doing way more heavy lifting than just keeping birthday balloons afloat. Helium is an inert element, meaning it doesn't interact with other chemicals, and because of that, there is absolutely no substitute for it in tech manufacturing. You strictly need it for making memory chips and processors. Take the helium away, and global semiconductor production instantly stops. Your smartphone essentially becomes a very expensive brick.
And here's the kicker. You can't even stockpile the stuff. It physically leaks right through containers and escapes into the atmosphere. As helium expert Phil Kornblith notes in the source material, a supply cutoff would instantly paralyze major manufacturing hubs, like South Korea, which supplies 2/3 of the world's memory chips. We're talking about an emergency global tech shutdown. Okay, let's pivot to the agricultural side. Keen uses a really great simple analogy here to ground the economics. Basically, you absolutely require the brown stuff, fertilizer, to grow the green stuff, like the crops and potatoes we eat. It's a direct, unbroken chain from a chemical byproduct in the Middle East straight to your dinner table. And without that fertilizer flowing through the supply chain, Keen estimates our planet could only naturally support a population of about 1 to 2 billion people. So a major disruption in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't just mean a higher grocery bill. His analysis suggests it essentially guarantees a devastating global famine.
Moving along to Section 3, 5 war endgame scenarios.
With this terrifying domino effect established, the expert outlines 5 potential endgames for the conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran. These range from disabled infrastructure all the way to catastrophic nuclear outcomes. Interestingly, Keen notes his most hoped-for scenario to avoid a global nuclear winter is Scenario 4, where Iran conventionally neutralizes Israel's nuclear capabilities. To put the sheer economic fallout of Scenario 2 into perspective, that's the disabling of Gulf power infrastructure, let's look at Dubai. An unplanned emergency shutdown of their aviation and power infrastructure costs an estimated $1.4 billion a day. Factoring in grounded logistics, tourism, and real estate, it shows just how fast a regional attack turns into a staggering global economic hemorrhage. The analysis also points to the Samson Doctrine as an incredibly chilling third scenario. This is a recognized geopolitical theory where a cornered nation facing total defeat decides on mutually assured destruction. Kind of like the biblical Samson pulling the temple pillars down on everyone, it suggests a state with nuclear capabilities might unleash them globally if it knows it's going to be destroyed. Now, maintaining absolute neutrality here, we do need to look at Professor Keen's specific assertion regarding geopolitical motivations. He suggests that U.S. leadership is intentionally manipulating these tensions to game oil prices, essentially running a financial pump and dump scheme. According to this view, the oscillating threats are designed to intentionally sway markets for financial gain, rather than for pure strategic necessity. Let's shift gears now. Section 4. The coming AI crash. We are transitioning from physical choke points to digital ones. Check out this projected data for 2026. Big tech companies are on track to spend a massive $720 billion on AI infrastructure. But the revenue generated from those investments is lagging way behind, creating a highly unsustainable 5-to-1 ratio of spending to revenue. Keen argues this mirrors historical tech bubbles and points straight to a classic boom and bust cycle. Furthermore, the source asserts this tech evolution is completely unlike past industrial revolutions. While things like the railway eventually created immense societal benefit, AI threatens to eliminate labor as a necessity for production altogether. Industry leaders, like those at Anthropic, are predicting a massive 50% displacement of working-class and entry-level jobs due to AI and robotics. So how do we handle this? Section 5, preparing for systemic shocks. On a macro scale, with global choke points threatened and a massive AI job wipeout looming, Keen points to Universal Basic Income, or UBI. Because AI could literally strip away the need for human labor in many sectors, UBI, which is a state-provided baseline income, is proposed as a necessary structural safety net to ensure human survival, when traditional employment simply isn't an option anymore. On an individual level, the expert strongly advises aggressively preparing for energy and food supply disruptions. The main takeaway? Prioritize self-sufficiency. This means insulating yourself from the fragile global grid by investing in home solar energy systems and developing local food production, even if it's just a garden. Basically, aggressively reduce your reliance on these hyper-fragile global supply chains. So, we'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. We've seen just how deeply interconnected our world is, where a 21-kilometer strait affects everything from your computer chip to your next meal, and where an impending AI economic shift threatens to reshape the very value of human labor. Knowing all of this, how will you build resilience into your own life and prepare for the domino effect? Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.